16 days of waiting till we find out what happens with Lauri Markkanen. What will happen with Lauri Markkanen next on Locked on Jazz. Bum 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 pow.
You are Locked on Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network. Your team every day.
How are you? I'm David Locke, radio voice of the Utah Jazz, Jazz NBA insider. This is Locked on Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz, giving you insight, expertise, geeky numbers, and hopefully making it way better to be a Jazz fan. On today's show, 16 days till August 6th, and we find out what happens with Lauri Markkanen, and it will be the only story in all of the NBA, everyone talking about it. So we will as well. Podzeimski, Kuminga. The Warriors willing to give up one? Neither or both? Transition defense looked much better in Summer League. Does it translate to something for the season? And Isaac Okoro is still out there. Is that something the Jazz should get involved in? And what about South Sudan taking the national team to the wire? Wow, my voice is terrible this morning. As I mentioned, I am David Locke, radio voice of the Utah Jazz, Jazz NBA insider, and this is Locked on Jazz. Thank you for making Locked on Jazz your first listen of the day. We are free and available on all podcasting apps. And give us a thumbs up or subscribe. We appreciate it. And to the everydayers, you're the greatest. Thank you very much. All right, today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. As the playoffs are done, the sports world stops churning like we want, but summer FanDuel is getting all its customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. All right, let's get the basics just so everyone has it. Everydayers, you're probably there. Hopefully some new people as well. Lauri Markkanen, when he left Chicago to sign with Cleveland, okay, it took a long time. And uniquely, because it took a long time, means that Lauri's deal, he cannot sign an extension until August 6th. On August 6th is the first time that Lauri can sign an extension with the Utah Jazz. The Jazz currently have a bunch of cap space. The Jazz can take that salary cap space right now that they have, give a bunch of it to Lauri and extend him. And then once they do that, give him that cap space, then they can extend him at a better number. So right now the Jazz have about 28, 30 million, depending on which deals you have under 30 million cap space. And they can use a collection of that cap space, depending what's negotiated with Lauri, give it to Lauri, and then they take that new number and they extend off that number, and that's the route for Lauri to get the most money right now. Okay. And that, for the first time that can happen, is August 6th. And every indication in the world is that on August 6th, the Utah Jazz will extend Lauri Markkanen that offer. And then the little twist on this is that if Lauri waits a day to sign it, he then cannot be traded until he can't be traded in this trade deadline because 6 months would go by and he wouldn't be available to be traded. Okay, so those are the facts. So what we have right now is the Jazz franchise in a unique situation where they have this all-star caliber player, and it's not quite sure who they love, and they're willing to give him a lot of money and sign him. Let's make sure that's perfectly clear. And then there's also a question of whether the Jazz, might be the timelines. I'm not sure I've ever believed this timeline thing, but there's a concept that Lauri is the single most available player out there, and the Jazz are finding out what his worth is. And so in the next 16 days of waiting till the 6th, we find out. And what gets super interesting on this is that on the 3rd, 4th, and 5th, the Warriors have to be sitting around, or the Spurs, or the Rockets, or whomever. Let's not forget that last time we did this, it was Donovan Mitchell to the Knicks, Donovan Mitchell to the Knicks, Donovan Mitchell to the Knicks, Donovan Mitchell to the Knicks. I see Ryan Smith somewhere, and Ryan Smith tells me, I think he's probably going to the Cavaliers. Whoa. What? And the next day he went to the Cavaliers. So there are always other possibilities, and Lauri Markkanen is a fabulous player who fits with just about every single team. If you go trade for Trae Young, you have to adapt your team for Trae Young. If you trade for Karl Anthony Towns, you might have to adapt your team a little bit. Lauri really fits into just about anybody's style and anybody's team, the way he plays, and just about any position, 3, 4, 5, which makes him incredibly appealing for all these teams. The Spurs, the Rockets, anyone that's out there could make a deal for Lauri, and he would fit perfectly onto their roster. So all those teams now know if they're going to try to make an offer that's going to meet Danny Ainge's standards, they have 16 days to do it. So we have 16 days to watch this take place each and every day here on Locked On Jazz. Mark Stein, in his Substack, the former New York Times reporter, reports that the Warriors talks are still going on because the Jazz seem interested enough in Brandin Podzeimski to make it worse. And the stories that I've heard are that the Warriors are completely unwilling to move Podzeimski or Kuminga. And the word on the Paul George trade was that the Warriors were unwilling to move Johanthan Kuminga to get Paul George. If that's true, I find that crazy. But I guess I'm not a believer that Johanthan Kuminga is about to be an all-star. Joe Lacob, the outspoken, loud owner of the Golden State Warriors, literally went on to a show recently, I think it was during the NBA Summer League, and said he thinks Podzeimski is going to be an all-star. That's a stretch. That's a crazy stretch. I like Brandin Podzeimski. He has great college numbers. He had nice rookie year numbers, averaging 9.6 rebounds, 4 assists. He's a unique rebounder for a 6'5" guard. He could be really good. All-star? Like he's the next Shai Gilgeous-Alexander? I don't see that at all. I think he's really good. I think he's really unique. He's like really unique batting language. I think he's unique. Like the rebounding aspect of him is guard and his toughness and taking charges and 9 rebounds a game in college. And that translates to 6 rebounds a game in the pros. There's some neat stuff here. 27 minutes a night. All-star? Wow. Only out of respect for what an all-star is. Not out of a disrespect to Brandin Podzeimski. But like bona fide starter? Sure. Like he's only 21 years old. So yeah, he could become a starter. Shooting guard starter in the NBA. Free throw shooting is a little disconcerting, honestly. Like 63% last year in college was weird, and pros weird. 77 in college is not what you'd expect. Like you'd want him in the mid 80s as if you think he's that guy. And the Warriors are reportedly completely unwilling under any circumstance to move Podzeimski. I find it's negotiations. And maybe I'm crazy on this, but let's go to the Ringer top 100. Okay. Lauri is, I think, like 35, which I find low. But go with it. Where's Lauri? Maybe he's a little higher than that now. They move him around. Lauri is 28. That actually feels about right. The 3 players ahead of him are Kyrie Irving, Domantas Sabonis, and Dame Lillard. And the 3 players behind him are Paulo Banchero, John Morant, and Tyrese Maxey. Maxey might be ahead of Lauri. Okay, so Lauri's in that group. Do we think that Podzeimski or Kuminga are ever going to be top 30 players in the NBA? And if you're the Warriors, Kuminga's currently at 81 on Ringer's list. What do you think the ceiling, best case scenario for Podzeimski and Kuminga is? Are either of them going to be top 50 players in the NBA? Kuminga gets a shot, maybe, but there's not a lot of track record that happens. Top 50 players in the NBA, by the way, are they going to be better than DeJounte Murray, Mikal Bridges, DeMar DeRozan, Jared Allen, Desmond Bane, Jaren Jackson, Julius Randle, Alfred Sengun, Chet Holmgren, Kristaps Porzingis. That's 40 to 50. They need cost certainty. I got it. Kuminga's about to not be cost certainty. Maybe they want Podzeimski because he is cost certainty for a long time. It's an interesting 16 days. Because I think the pressure cooker is really on the Warriors on this one. When they have a player as great as Steph Curry, who's 35 years old, and they've got like one more chance with him. Podzeimski and Kuminga might be really, really good, but it's hard for me to see Podzeimski and Kuminga helping them win a championship or get to the conference finals or make a run. And it's really easy for me to see Lauri Markkanen do it because he's great, which is also why if you're the Jazz, you just might get to the 6th, give him this extension, and call it awesome. It's a really interesting situation. I got to tell you, it's got 16 days worth of talk too. It's really, really interesting. All right, Jazz transition defense last year was horrendous, the worst in the NBA. Did they get better in Summer League, and is that something to look forward to? I think so. Next on Locked On Jazz. Monday edition of Locked On Jazz is brought to you by our friends over at Murdoch Chevy, located in Woods Cross and in Logan. Chevy truck, the Colorado and the Silverado are just amazing. The lineup of SUVs with the Blazer and the Trailblazer and the Equinox, all there for you. And the Suburban and the Tahoe are the Utah County assault vehicles we know and love. It is Murdoch's. It is the Murdoch's 80 plus years in Utah with Chevy trucks, Americana, all mixed into one. It can't get to be a better combination. Stop by Woods Cross or in Logan to find out what the latest that's going on. Both drive one of those Silverado trucks and feel how smooth that ride is. If you're going to stop by, please email me first at dlock09@gmail.com. That's dlock09@gmail.com to get you a setup with your VIP meeting that you deserve as a Locked On every day. Today's show is also brought to you by FanDuel. With the sports world slowing down a little bit, FanDuel is now hooking up all customers with boost or bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most of your summer. FanDuel is the official sports book of Locked On. It is also the official partner of Major League Baseball. Right now, a bunch of games tonight. Tampa Bay plays the Yankees, and St. Louis is in Pittsburgh for kind of a classic, a full docket of games in the Angels and the Mariners. You can have to hit a home run parlay builder. You put a bunch of players together, and if most of them hit a home run together, you can do it. That's super fun. Choose a bunch of different players to do that. U.S. is playing Germany International Showdown, by the way. Shohei Ohtani props exist for you. They've got it all. And on tomorrow's show, I saw some over-unders on wins in the NBA from FanDuel, and we will jump on that tomorrow and see what they have as the Jazz money line win number over-under for the year coming up, all at FanDuel.com. FanDuel.com. That's FanDuel.com. Thanks so much for making Locked On Jazz your first listen of the day. For your second listen, have you checked out the Big 6 and 60? 6 biggest stories in the sports world, like the Dodgers sweeping their series, and the other NFL camps opening, all those kind of things. Get the 6 biggest stories from the Locked On hosts, about 8 minutes on each. About 10 minutes in each. That's how 6 out of 60 works. My math's not very good. You got it. That's the deal. All right. Last year, the Jazz were the worst team in the NBA in transition defense. It was super, super ugly. And why? So this is probably the biggest thing the Jazz coaching staff is digging into in the offseason, is trying to figure out why the Jazz rank where they rank, why they allowed so much transition. Now, some of it was due to turnovers. Maybe the most important thing the Jazz have to figure out is whether or not their crashing the offensive glass had anything to do with it. So the Jazz allowed, according to Cleaning the Glass, they allowed 17% of opponents' possessions in transition. Okay? And the average was 15%. So they're allowing, kind of in a course of a night, 2 more opportunities a night in transition, which is, not great, problematic. The other thing that you have to kind of look at here is whether it's worth it or not. So when you look at transition, and there's kind of some interesting things that will take place here on it. If you look at, by the way, the NBA.com stats for it, the Jazz allowed 21% of their opponent's possessions. They use a different metric. And the next closest was 19, and the league average was 17. Okay, so just Jazz allowed 27 points a night in transition. The next closest was 24.6, and the league average was around 21. So it's a lot. 6 more points a game in transition. Here's what's interesting about this, if you want to do the math on it for a second. So first thing is the Jazz need to figure out what caused that. And the Jazz defensive transition was last in the league off steals. So that was a large of it. So the Jazz allowed 71% off steals into transition, okay? Which was the highest rate of anyone in the NBA. Their rate off of live rebounds was also highest in the NBA. So, and that one was actually considerably higher than the league average. 35% of all rebounds turned into a transition play, according to Clean the Glass. And that's league averages at 29%. So that was problematic. And teams averaged 1.33, 133 points per offensive rebound, or per rebound, which is worse than the league. We were actually half decent off turnovers in actually defending it. So the first thing is on the analysis of transition defenses, our transition defense was just problematic across the board. Okay, so we were not good off steals and we were not good off live rebounds. I saw a Reddit post that, like, we've got to stop crashing the glass. Okay, this is actually interesting on two factors. Okay, one is there has not been over the years a great correlation between the teams that crash the glass the most and the teams that have the most transition defensive problems. The last year was interesting. The 6 teams that crashed the glass the most, 3 of them were really bad. Or kind of bad. Denver, or Atlanta, Utah, and Portland. And if you look at transition defense of those teams, so New York got the most offensive rebounds of anyone in the league last year. They were pretty good. And New York, in transition, was the 7th best team in the NBA at denying transition. And the 6th best team in denying transition off rebounds. Utah was 30th. Portland was 20th, 3rd best rebounding team, 20th in the league in denying rebounds, and actually pretty good at defending them. The Golden State Warriors were 22nd, so not great. Atlanta was 26th, and Denver was 8th. So what's interesting to me about this is, of the 6 teams in the NBA last year that did the most offensive rebounding, 2 were top 10 league at denying you from getting fast breaks, but the other 4 were all bad. It might just have to do with whether you're good or bad, and not whether or not if you're the offensive rebounding is causing this. The math on this is pretty interesting. Okay. So when a shot goes up and misses, at that point in time, your points per possession is 0. Okay. Right? It's 0. And if they get the offensive rebound, overall points per possession in the NBA last year was up to about 1.15. Okay. If you were to just keep someone in the half court, you shoot, get back, no threat to offensive rebound at all, it's about 1.0. And if it's in transition, it's about 1.27. So a transition opportunity, just for the sake of making things super easy for a second, and I'm exaggerating it to prove is 0.3. Okay, stay with me here. 0.3. Okay, so you allow someone to be in transition instead of being in the half court. They've gained a 0.3. The moment the shot goes up and it's not good, your expected point value offensively is 0. 0. If you get the offensive rebound, it's 1.2. Offensive live rebounds, 1.2. Therefore, the math is so dramatically in favor of offensive rebounding. If you allow 4 more, if you get an offensive rebound and you allow 4 more transition opportunities, it's the same. 1 offensive rebound to 4 transition opportunities off live rebounds. Now, off steals, it's 1.4, and the math starts to go the other way because steals go the other way. Right. Get the shot up. You're missing. Your expected point value is 0. If you get the rebound, your expected point value is 1.2. If you put the shot up and get a 0, their offensive value is 1.15. If they get to play in transition, it's 1.27. And so I'm actually exaggerating it, giving it as much value as I have. Oh, half court is 1.0. Transition's 1.27. So that's where we're going 0.3. So our transition defense last year was brutal. We allowed the most off steals. We allowed the most off rebounds. But the math on it is totally dramatically, clearly that you need to crash the glass hard. You just have to get back smart. And what New York and Denver showed is if you're actually good and mature and focused, you can fully do that. What Portland, Golden State, Atlanta, and Utah showed is you also are vulnerable and better be better than that. There is a free agent that's still on the board named Isaac Okoro. There's a bunch of internet sites that are talking about the Jazz as the spot for him. Why? Because the Jazz have cap room and this agent wants the Jazz to drive up the price. But is it actually a viable thing for the Utah Jazz? We discuss it next on Locked On Jazz. Today's edition of Locked On Jazz is brought to you by our friends at eBay Motors. Ride or die time, baby. Time to make sure that your ride or die gets the patience, the passion, the precision that it deserves. And where do you do it? You do it at eBay Motors with their 122 million parts. And when 122 million parts plus guaranteed fit, and you're rolling every time. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. And because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need, the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP. Bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Motors. Guaranteed fit. Only available to U.S. customers. Thanks so much for making Locked On Jazz your first listen of the day. We are free and available on all podcasting apps. Tomorrow, we'll look at the FanDuel over-unders. Hard to tell if they've done that over-under with Lauri or without. But one of the biggest questions I think a bunch of Jazz fans have is whether or not with Lauri could the Jazz, those who want to get into the Cooper flag, could the Jazz lose enough? Could the Jazz lose enough even with Lauri is a question. Very interesting to see how this plays out. All right, Isaac Okoro. We'll see if I come back here. But now I have internet again. So Isaac Okoro, as I was saying, and we'll see what we're not at it, seems to still be available. The Jazz are being mentioned about him right now. You're never sure if the Jazz are really being mentioned or if agents are just throwing the Jazz out because they have cap space. But Okoro's interesting. He's 6'5", 225 pounds. He's only 23 years old. He's got maybe the best body in the NBA. I am utterly convinced that the best defensive players in the NBA are big and strong and physical, not necessarily long and lanky. He is limited offensively. He generally fits into the can't shoot category until he shot 39% last year on 3 threes a game. His minutes have gone from 32 as a rookie, 30 as a second-year player, 22 as a third-year player, back up to 27. He's interesting to me because he's 23. He's interesting to me because we need somebody who can defend. We need somebody who can we cannot throw Taylor Hendricks, Keontae George, and everybody on everybody's best player and watch them just get annihilated all year. I just cannot imagine that's going to be good for them. But when we play Sacramento, if Keontae's got to guard De'Aaron Fox the whole time, we're dead. I mean, winning games, but it's not just about winning games. It's about the experience and whether or not he can handle it. And if Taylor Hendricks, I guess he can learn guarding DeMar DeRozan, but hopefully not for 30 minutes a night. Maybe that's where we are. But I think that's super hard on those guys. I'm soft. I give these guys a break. I'm soft on these guys. And so I do think Isaac Okoro is super interesting to us. Now, he kind of plays a 2-3, and he can't really shoot it, and he doesn't have a super handle, and so there's some limits to, what he can do, and that's why he's available right now. And I'm not expecting massive skill development for him, and I'm not expecting him to win us a dramatic amount of more games. I think he makes us a viable – he allows us to be able to play and free up Keontae and Taylor Hendricks and Cody Williams and all these guys to do things. That's kind of my take. The Jazz are being mentioned to him. The Jazz, from an age standpoint, it is pretty interesting. I mean, he really, truly is one of the best physical defenders in the NBA. And the biggest thing we have to make sure we're not doing is blocking the path of our players to develop. And you can do that in 2 ways. One is by having somebody on the roster who's getting minutes instead of them, and so they don't get to play. But the other is to overload them in a way that they just can have so little success that they get broken down. And so a little bit to me is a feeling that what Isaac Okoro kind of does, he is give the Jazz the ability to let everybody else develop, and maybe even him. He's a restricted free agent. He did not sign his $11.8 million qualifying offer yet. He could still do that. We'll see. Detroit's being mentioned. Brooklyn's being mentioned. The Jazz are being mentioned because that's just kind of where we are. And that's who those teams are. So it's an interesting play to me. I'm in on it. Actually, Isaac Okoro from the very beginning has been a player that I would have liked. Markelle Fultz is another one. I don't think they help us win. I think they make us be able to field rosters that allow our other players to thrive. And that's what I'm looking for. I just want to give a tip of the hat to the South Sudan U.S. game. That was crazy. France has actually lost 4 in a row in their warm-up games. There's some interesting stuff going on in the Olympics right now. Carolick Jones had this unbelievable game for South Sudan, and the way his roster works, he has till the end of the day or tomorrow for someone to sign him in the NBA. He was with the Windy City Bulls, so let's see if something happens there. And by the way, Dante Exum dislocated a finger in the Australian game, so if you suddenly don't see him, that is why. And that wraps us. That is Locked On Jazz. Tomorrow we'll look at the FanDuel over-unders and see where they have the Jazz and see what that means for how the Jazz should strategize things. It is Locked On Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz. Great to be with you. Thank you very much for tuning in. I appreciate you. On the national channel on YouTube, we'll send you the first ever national 24/7 sports channel streaming live on Utah Locked On Sports today. Check out Big 6 and 60 on audio.